I'm John Chafee. I'm the president CEO of the NCEAST Alliance. We're delighted to have you with us today. Thanks very much. Hopefully you'll find it of value and use in terms of not only the information, but the connections that hopefully you'll make today as well. Just to give you a little bit of background, always, the advertising comes first. So the NCEAST Alliance is a regional economic development agency. We're kind of a public-private organization. We're sustained by contributions from our individual counties and cities, public side, grants that we may get from both state and federal sources, foundations, private foundations, but also private contributions. We serve in the role of advocacy, advocating for institutions, organizations, the needs of Eastern North Carolina. We're also a traditional economic development group in that we try to recruit companies to the region, but we're also mindful in terms of being able to work with our partners to take care of the needs of our existing companies, and we really do that in terms of overall capacity building, but we're focused particularly in terms of workforce development and STEM education. We don't actually deliver content. We're just kind of the glue or the partner that kind of connects the different resources and organizes them, and then helps work with those to actually attract money to be able to support and sustain those activities. That's our footprint, 28 counties in Eastern North Carolina. This is the southernmost county in our region, Onslow County, and we go up and over to Goldsboro and then all the way up 795 to the Interstate 95 to the Virginia state line. I'll mention we do have an overall umbrella, so a group called STEM East network sits under our tent and does some mighty good work in Eastern North Carolina. Not all over our region yet. It's something we started about 5 or 6 years ago, so we're restricted to our southern counties, and the intent is to be able to move north and expand that to all of our counties at some point in time. So that's a little bit who we are. One is to just highlight for you in terms of the reason for us being here is a good fortune is partnering with East Carolina University, the Center for Sustainability, and a grant that they received from the Environmental Protection Agency, which basically you'll hear a little bit about from Tarek. And that is essentially how do we work with our companies to promote sustainability and helping them figure out better ways to become more efficient as well as environmentally responsible. So a grant from them is part of the thing that sustains us, but also we've been very fortunate to receive support from some of our private companies and other organizations that have a residency in Eastern North Carolina. Frank Door Company, I'll let you read it, but a company that relocated here from New York about 15 years or so ago. And they said if they'd known about it earlier, they would have come earlier. Great little company located in, what's the name of that little town? Newport. Thank you very much. You must have doors from Frank Door in your facility. In Newport, North Carolina, Carteret County. So we appreciate their sponsorship. Also, Mount Olive Pickles. I hope most of you know about Mount Olive. Founded by an immigrant about 90 years ago in Mount Olive, North Carolina. It's one of the headquartered companies there. There are several others, which is impressive for a little town of Mount Olive. Went out and toured their facility the other day. It's pretty immense, and they're growing rapidly. They're now the #1 pickle brand in the U.S. Excited about that. And finally, also our partners, SBTDC, Small Business and Technology Development Center, which is statewide, and they're a key partner in working with us both in terms of new as well as existing companies. So they're basically help in terms of companies develop strategies, but also financial mechanisms to help them grow their companies. So with that, the commercials are over. This is a little bit of just a reminder of our agenda for the day. We'll roll through. When it comes to that point in time, after the first couple of speakers, we'll break and we'll go over. I think lunch will be delivered next door. Is that correct? Or in the back? In the lobby. Basically, where the name tags were, I guess, right? Thank you, Sheila. And so we'll do that, we'll break, and then we'll come right back. As you noticed, we're allowing you 15 minutes for lunch. Basically, that's to allow you to get started, and then we're just going to go ahead and restart so that we can hopefully get you out of here pretty easily by 1 o'clock. The other element I want to say is that thanks to Jacksonville Onslow Economic Development for coordinating and being able to help us set up for this event. This is the second out of 4 of these that we propose to do around the region. We'd love to have local partners, so thank you, Sheila, for your help, but also a little bit of thanks to the Onslow County for allowing us to use this incredibly nice facility, nice technology. So if you would pass it back to the commissioners, county manager, Sheila, we'd appreciate that. So now without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dr. Tarek Abdul Salam with the Center for Sustainability at ECU. He's an engineering professor within the College of Technology and Engineering. And I think you got a little bit of a snapshot about his bio in terms of the material we sent out. So I'm not going to review all that, only to say that thank you very much, Tarek. It's been good work with you. I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, good morning, and thank you, John, for the introduction. I'm Tarek Abdul Salam. I'm a professor of mechanical engineering at East Carolina University, and also I'm the PI of this project. So I'm going to take 5 minutes to talk about this project. It's funded by the Environmental Protection Agency, and the reason for this fund is to help small to medium industries. Oops. Yet again. Okay, so this actually one of 3 projects we received from EPA in the last 6 years. And this project is mainly to help food and beverage industries. And this is actually one of the requirements for this proposal, for this fund. So EPA wants us to help food and beverage industries in North Carolina, and this is how we got the money. So what we do in this project, we try to do half a day to 1 day energy assessment. So we do lean and green on site. We try to collect some information before visiting the facility. It worked fine with small industries, but for big industries, we may need to go again and again and collect more data. But we work mainly with small to medium-sized industries in North Carolina. Focus now in eastern North Carolina, but we can cover any place in North Carolina. And this is actually free to everyone. EPA is paying for this, and there's a match fund from ECU, so ECU and EPA are really paying for all of this effort. So it's free to you. Okay. So again, we go for we collect some data first through the phone. We are interested in electrical bills, utility data in general, gas, water, and energy bills, and knowing just the consumption. The team mainly would be from 1 or 2 professors from the College of Engineering, and graduate and undergraduate students. We don't have many graduate students, so we focus more on undergraduate students. We take with us mechanical, electrical, and environmental engineering students. So it's a big team. We go back to the office, and of course, we do most of the work in the office. And at the end, we submit a technical report to you. We focus on energy, anything that's related to energy consumption, and also related to pollution, because the money is coming for the pollution prevention program. So these are the 2 areas. But as I said, we do also lean. So we do lean and green, so energy, environment, and lean manufacturing. That's what we do. Here are some of the areas we look at, mainly lighting. We also look at chillers, boilers, ventilation, HVAC systems in general, office equipment, domestic hot water. These are just some areas we look at. And again, the main purpose here is to save energy. So what you're going to have at the end is a complete technical report with all the recommendations. We gave you a technical report with a summary page at the beginning that has all the options, energy options or recommendations, and then another page that has the lean recommendations. I'm going to show you an example of the lean recommendations. And that's what you see in the table here. So we gave you a table, two tables, contain summary of or description of each of the assessment recommendation, estimated annual savings, implementation cost, and then simple payback period for the lean recommendations as well as for the energy recommendations. This report will be shared with you. We don't share this with EPA. What we share with EPA is mainly the amounts, like how kilograms of CO2 saved, energy kilowatts hours, something like that, but we don't share names, we don't share any detailed information with EPA. The project is mainly to help to reduce the emission and reduce the energy consumption. And again, we have done this through the last 6 years. We never submitted any specific information or any data. So this report will be shared only with you. In the report, we even don't mention your name. We just mention company 1, 2, 3, 4, so we don't really refer to your company at all. And the information will be just us and you, and we can sign a confidentiality form if needed. So that's something we have done in the last 6 years. So this is just a sample from the lean recommendations. We provide another table. Now, what you're going to see else in the report is detailed information. So once you see the table, the next chapter will be how we calculated these options, how we got the savings, how the savings were estimated, and then one chapter about implementation too, how you implement this. And we can help after also submitting the report. So we can give you a call and help you in the implementation. Something new this year, because Ariana's here and she's going to talk at the end of today's meeting, and she will tell you more about what she's doing. So she will offer free help. I'll let her talk about this. So once we give you this table and the other table, of course, in the report, she can help you in the finance, right? So I'll let her talk about this, and this will also be free to you, so no cost to you. So that's the financial part. We don't do this. We just give you the simple payback period, and she will take it from there and help you to finance cash flow, I believe, what you do, right? This is an example of the lean recommendations. So it's really hard to read, but this is value stream mapping. Half of the report will be about this. I'm sorry, but I just wanted to show you the whole picture. So, but it's really hard to read. So this is where we tell you about the process, where we can save time, tell you exactly how this process can be more efficient. So you see time here, you see actually two charts of this. One is the current situation and one is the recommended value stream mapping. We have a professor from industrial engineer working with us. He's another co-PI, and he's the one who's doing this. I'm the one who's really doing the energy. And we have a professor from economics too helping us. So hopefully this professor will be working with Ariana. If you agree, that's would be actually after submitting the report. Okay, so this is my information, and you can go to ECU's website, College of Engineering and Technology, and find more information about the Center for Sustainability or Engineering. This is just a website for the center, but also you can go to College of Engineering and Technology. And feel free to send me an email or give me a call if any information is needed about this project. Oh, maybe I need to mention that John is our partner in this project, and he's doing the workshops for us, and this is the second workshop, the second out of 4 workshops, so there are 2 more. And thank you for the great work. Thank you. Questions? facilities, industrial facilities.
Facilities.
10 and 14. 14, but also we went to the Outer Banks to help homeowners and vacation rental properties. So we did 31 homes and about 14 till today. So 14 and 31 homes.
And on the manufacturing side of 14, how many of them do you know actually implemented the recommendations that you gave for the assessment?
We submitted 10 reports. So out, I would say 3 out. One of them did all the recommendations, and 3 halfway, and some still resisting because we face some issues like they don't own the building. So when we recommend something related to the building, they don't want to do it. Again, the report will be shared with only the industry people. So sometimes they agree with our recommendations. Sometimes they said, well, we cannot really do this. So we recommend what we see or what we see is right to save energy, but the implementation is not what we expected. But I was the project engineer of Industrial Assessment Center at Old Dominion probably 20 years ago. And this project was funded by DOE, Department of Energy, to do similar job but focus only on energy. Implementation rate of the industrial assessment centers was really very low. It's focused on industry, medium and small size. So that's not really a big surprise. But at least in our project, we just wanted to promote the word about pollution prevention. What's pollution prevention? How we can save money? Because a big difference between pollution prevention and pollution control. When you do pollution control, you pay money to just treat whatever you have. When you do pollution prevention, you cut from the source. So the main idea also is just to spread the word and tell people about pollution prevention. How can you save money with, I would say, least amount of money or investment. Another component of this project is education, because we have graduate and undergraduate students, so it's really important to us. We are a university, so it's important to us to involve our students in this type of activities. So different components, but your question was about implementation, not really what we expected. So.
No, but that's good to know. So, I represent several clients that are in the food and beverage manufacturing industry, and some of them are, if they don't own their facility, their ability to control how much they implement will depend on their relationship and the willingness of their landlord versus a larger company that may own their facility and may have the ability to make those decisions. And so I was curious as to what you found or what the variety of reactions was to the recommendations.
Yeah, I would say, again, not many. And again, there are many reasons for this. Also, we deal with small size. So you may see 1 or 2 engineers there in each facility. You may see no engineers. So also, you see one person working with you, and then next day this person is gone. Another issue. We are trying, and Ariana will do this too, we're trying to show those people that if you implement, let's say, option 1, you can save money, and simply you can monitor this and you can record the savings and then take this money, invest in recommendation number 2. But to do this, it requires probably a few months, it could be a year. Yeah.
Well, there's education on both sides too. I mean, it's great to see the education that's provided to ECU students, but there's also a learning curve on the manufacturer side, understanding the cost savings from it's like healthcare. I mean, the preventative mindset versus the treatment mindset, and sometimes it takes a while to educate your clients to recognize that there really is a bigger cost savings here than having to deal with treatment or responding to a violation that results from the pollution.
Okay.
Yes, sir. The revenue size of those businesses thus far participated, can you kind of give a range of indication there? I mean, are we talking really small, less than $1 million, or is it multi-million-dollar operators?
I don't have this number. Don't ask this. We ask, we classify the size of the facility based on the number of workers and the area. We can ask this information, and we tried in the past, it won't be given to us. Some financial information or about the investment, we cannot get this. So So it's based on the number of workers. We say 20 or less would be small to us.
Are your assessments limited to just the food and beverage industry facilities?
Through the project, yes, but again, we can do more through the center. So yes.
So related processing facilities?
We can do this through the Center for Sustainability, but from the project, we can't do anything other than food and beverage because this is actually what EPA wants us to do. It's their focus. Okay.
Am I going backwards? Oh, yeah, I see what I'm doing. Sorry about that. All right, gotcha. All right. All right. I was going backwards and I didn't realize. Hello, everyone. My name is Wendy Worley, and I work for the state of North Carolina, and wanted to first thank Dr. Abdel Salem. I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. But the work that he's doing is really fantastic work in terms of doing these types of waste assessments. And we have, at the state level, a program that does similar work, and I know that we'd like to promote that, but also work together as a team, because these are really highly valuable assessments that we hope that we can provide that free service to our industries across the state. I'll give you a little background of what our agency is. You may have heard from a few of my colleagues at some previous events. So I work for the Department of Environmental Quality, and within that, there is one division that is non-regulatory, and that is the division that I work for, the Division of Environmental Assistance and Customer Service. And I'm not going to get bogged down in all the acronyms and the different divisions that the state has, but just to give you a broad brush, our agency is divided within the division, our non-regulatory division. We're divided up into different groups that try to serve the industry and the citizens of North Carolina in environmental programs. So primarily we do technical assistance to industries, recycling businesses, local governments in how to reduce their waste, how to be more environmentally sustainable. So that's it in a broad brush. Drilling down a little bit, I specifically work for the Recycling Business Assistance Center, and in that Recycling Business Assistance Center, you can think of our group specifically for kind of a cross between an economic development role and a waste reduction specialist. So we know a lot about waste reduction, recycling, but we are also trying to develop new markets, trying to encourage the recycling industry to both locate here and expand their services and the materials they're able to collect, so that folks like you can utilize those, so you have an outlet to take your waste materials. So that's in a nutshell what we do. And of course, waste is really anything that you don't have a use for anymore. And recycling is trying to turn it on its head and saying, you know, what someone else's waste is can actually be raw materials to manufacture new products. And in fact, in the state of North Carolina, there is a very strong recycling industry, I'm proud to say. Our agency itself has been around since the late 80s, trying to help develop these markets. And we have over 700 North Carolina companies alone here ready to take material, all the way from traditional recyclables, organics, the gamut. But these are just a few examples that you can see on the screen of some end products that are being made in North Carolina. Food, manufacturers' waste can be, one outlet can be pet food manufacturing, soil amendments from food waste, jackets from water bottles. All of these are great end products that are being made right here. And of course, I'm not going to go over that. This is the flow of materials within the manufacturing. Y'all are very familiar with this. You do this every day. But my point here is that there are obviously inputs to your manufacturing process. You're making a new product, you're adding things, you're working with that material, and then there are outputs too. In addition to your end product, there's a whole set of outputs that you have that aren't necessarily waste, or they don't have to be waste, not all of them anyway. And so that's the opportunity. At this point, a lot of folks would think of all those things, their waste bill, that's money, it's just cost of doing business. But one of the points that we're trying to make and to help feed raw materials into the recycling industry is that material oftentimes has value. And let's find what has value and pull it out of the waste stream so that we can be more efficient with it, save money, et cetera. So at our office, we have a couple of tools that can help us do this. I talked about part of our division has the Waste Reduction Partners. I know they came and spoke to you as well. They're the folks that help do these waste assessments. And they work with my team because we work most directly with those recycling markets. So oftentimes we'll go out on a site visit together, look at the material in the waste, and try to identify markets for materials that are currently being thrown away. So the Recycling Markets Directory, which you see a screenshot of right here, is an online searchable database that anyone can look at. Of course, our staff also uses this database to help drill down and identify quality markets for a specific company. So rather than just simply looking at a list, you can also call our office and say, hey, I have this material, are there markets for them? Are they near me? And our staff is available to help. In addition, we have what's called the North Carolina Waste Trader site. Waste Trader, you can think of that as similar. It's an online trading service. It's similar to the Markets Directory, but the distinction I want to make is the Recycling Markets Directory is going to list companies that are taking material on an ongoing basis, and it lists specifically what they take. They take metal, they take food waste, on and on. They'll tell you specifically what they take on a regular basis. But Waste Trader is a little bit different. For example, if you have a waste that you can't find a regular market for, but you think, gosh, this really ought to, somebody might want this, you can post it on materials available. You can see there's one of those links, and post that material and say the quantities you have. You can either post it anonymously if you want to, if you don't want that information getting out, and our office will help manage that connection, or you can just go ahead and post your contact information. And folks, on the other side, if you're looking for feedstock for something, you can look on the materials wanted, or you can post something on materials wanted. You can look on the materials available and see if you can't find that trade. And so it really acts as a conduit to help match materials and generators and folks who might use that material. So that's one of the options. Our office also puts together a Recycling Works newsletter. I will say that this newsletter is primarily directed towards recycling businesses. So again, my specific group is trying to help develop markets for recyclables, and it's primarily focused on that. But if you are interested in receiving the email, it's an online email distribution quarterly. It can provide you with some good information about upcoming markets. We try to post articles about new companies coming online to take certain waste. What kind of waste are they trying to take for recycling? And it's a great way to get linked in. I'm also not going to spend a ton of time here because I think these are things that people typically think of when you think of recycling. But These are your traditional recyclables that oftentimes can have a market. There are companies in the state that are willing to take this material. It's a matter of how much do you have, can you get it in the form that they want it. But we can work with you to help identify those challenges and try to overcome them. These are certainly options and a way to look at your waste stream and try to look for value there. I imagine a lot of the material that you might have in your facility are organic material. This definition is, we have on staff, actually, I should say, a organics recycling specialist, Jorge Montezuma, and this is his definition of organics that he likes to use. Anything that was recently living, plant or animal. So it kind of gives you this broad brush. You know, we can really think about that in a big way. But there are options for utilizing organic waste, quote unquote waste, and putting it back into a manufacturing process. If you happen to have material that, food material that is edible still, there's a huge network of food banks that that would be happy to have this material. And the more I learn about those organizations, the more I am really impressed with their logistics. Obviously, you have to really work fast to make sure it remains edible and servable to the needy communities, but they have an incredible logistics operation that can help you get that material to an appropriate source. Of course, animal feeding operations, I'm just going to touch on there too. You know, we've found, especially with the growth of breweries, local breweries, that the brewer's waste can also often be taken directly to animal feeding operations, and that is happening already. There are farmers out there that are wanting that yeast, that brewer's waste, and are readily taking that. So that's pretty exciting. I mentioned pet food manufacturing as I did earlier in the slide, but this, I admit, is relatively new to me. But I have been made aware that there are a number of pet food manufacturers you can see in that little slide, and I have a printout of those as well that may be options depending on the type of organic waste that you might have, if you're able to separate that, to direct it to a pet food market. The EDP&C supplied me with this list, and you know, full disclaimer, I haven't contacted these companies, so I will tell you that, you know, that's something that's on our to-do list in our office, is to get to know these folks to understand a little bit better what they may or may not be able to take. I have a question, yeah.
Well, I actually have a comment. So I work for the North Carolina Department of Ag, and on the pet food, it would have to be analyzed and approved.
Yes.
By our pet food division, which is part of the Food and Drug Protection Division, so before it could actually be used. So folks just need to understand that there are going to be a couple interim steps.
That's a great point, and that is absolutely true. And that, you know, what I'm trying to paint the picture of, that there may be options, but that doesn't mean you can immediately go do it. We do need to work together to try to make sure that all the rules and regulations are being followed to make sure that everything's you know, safe, and that we are producing quality products. A little bit about the composting process, and I know this is probably not rocket science and not and not something you're unfamiliar with, but I want to talk a little bit about it, because I want to impress upon you that it is a manufacturing process. Composting operations also are regulated by the state of North Carolina. They must have permits to operate. There's a process that they must undergo to get the material from from a generator and to be able to make an end product. So, if you see in the back, there's woody material, there's pallets. Those, of course, need to be ground. Sometimes food waste needs to be ground to get it a uniform size. Certain temperatures have to be met in order to produce to kill pathogens and maintain a quality end product. So all of this is to say that it is a process. It's not just like, oh, let's just take the material, put it in a pile, and it'll be okay. It is a highly regulated industry, but can also provide great options for you. Of course, after the composting process is complete, then getting it back into use is the primary goal here, trying to return those nutrients back into the soil and making sure that those products are safe to use on the other side. And I bring this up because I want to say that it is a manufacturing process, and contamination is important. These are examples of composted material that had too much contamination in them. You see little strings of plastic from film or from bottles that have been crushed or bottle caps. These can cause difficulty in the composting operation. And I say this to only to press upon you that as you're working with companies that may want to take your organic waste, you have to be mindful of meeting their specs and making sure that you're handling the material in a way that gets it to market and in a usable way. So. The organic specialist in our office has produced this map. This is a map of all the composting and anaerobic digestion facilities in the state to date. He keeps this up to date, and there may be some new ones that we'll need to add, but so far this is it. And I don't expect you to remember all this, but I do want you to know at that link, and you can click on any one of the dots, and you can see exactly what the facility is. So you can see the name of the facility, a contact information, what they do at that facility. And you notice the dots are different colors. Those are based on the permit type that they are issued from the state of North Carolina, and those types. What type permit they have regulates what kind of inputs they can have. So a type 1 facility might take yard waste and pallets, clean wood waste. But as you move up the numbering system, the more complex the composting process is and the more diverse materials you can take. So for example, the type 4 facilities, and some of the type 3s are going to be the ones that are able to take the food manufacturing waste. And I just wanted to give you some pictures of a few facilities. Of course, McGill Environmental Systems, y'all are probably familiar with. They're in this region, and you can see that's a picture of one of their new investments. The Entropy facility is a anaerobic digestion facility that is out in the Charlotte area. And even if that may be too far for you guys, I did want to mention that we know that Carbon Cycle Energy is a company that has announced that it's going to be building in the Duplin County area as well. So I just wanted you to see sort of what an anaerobic digestion facility looks like, just in case you haven't seen that already. I have a list of, I sort of narrowed down that list from the map a little bit of the composters and anaerobic digesters in this area. So these are your market list of options. Certainly, if y'all are looking to do more of this work, we can help you. Certainly, our organic specialist goes to these facilities on a regular basis and can help you work with those companies to find a way to divert that material. And one of the things I say too is, I want, sometimes there's a myth that recycling should be free. And I want to really press upon you that the recycling industry is just that, is they are manufacturers, just like yourselves, and they are trying to produce end products. They have lots of costs to do that and cost to get the material to them. So sometimes there are costs associated with a recycling operation or utilizing a recycling facility. However, there are other ways that you can try to figure out, well, how can I balance this? How can how does this make sense for my bottom line to do? And part of that is looking at your own waste bill. And this is one of the things we do also with our assessments when we are trying to go into facilities, is trying to help you look at that waste bill. You'll see an example of a real bill from one of our manufacturers. And because they shared it with us, it was really important to understand, okay, they have, a waste bills can be pretty complicated. There's going to be a container rental fee. There's also going to be a pull fee. How many times does the waste collector come pick up that container? And then also, on top of that, there's the landfill disposal charge. So all of that goes into your waste costs. And trying to whittle that down the best you can, even if it may cost you some to get your material to a recycling market, you're going to be reducing on the other side. And certainly what we advise folks to do is to pay attention to your waste bill at the same time. And so if you know that you're pulling, for example, organic material out of your waste stream and you're sending it to a composter, maybe you don't need as big of a dumpster. Maybe it doesn't need to be pulled as often because a lot of the stinky, yucky material is getting in the compost bin and not in the dumpster. So maybe it doesn't have to be picked up as often. You can save there. And then, of course, you're going to save on tip fees because you're going to have less material in there. So, we just want to show folks that, don't forget that piece of it, because oftentimes we've seen facilities kind of overpay on their waste bill, because I guarantee you your waste hauler's not going to tell you. And I'm sorry if there's some waste haulers in here, but they're more often than not going to say, how can we reduce your bill? Now, another thing I wanted to mention that is a financial benefit to you guys and to anyone in the state, if you have property that is being used, that is either equipment or your facility, a portion of your facility that is wholly dedicated to recycling. For example, a baler that bales only recyclables. Or a grinder that's grinding up your wood waste or food waste, and it is only meant to do that in order to get it to market, to recycling market, then you can get a property tax credit on that piece of equipment. And even in your facility, if you own your facility, you can cordon off a certain square footage of your facility if it's dedicated solely to recycling, and get that taken off the recycling books. And that is for the life of that equipment or for as long as you own that building. So once it's taken off the books, you do not pay property tax on that. This program is administered from the regulatory arm of my agency, and I have her contact information there as part of the solid waste section in the Division of Waste Management. So what that requires is an application and then a verification by their staff that equipment is in fact being used for that. But I tell you guys this in part also to help you find value. If you're going to all the trouble to separate waste, to pull it out, take advantage of this tax break. Don't pay property tax on that equipment, because it'll help your bottom line. It'll help turn that waste into value. I think that's all I have for now. Again, I have some resources if you're interested, and be happy to take any questions.
Here's a tough question. When will the pizza box transition from non-traditional recyclable to traditional?
Pizza boxes. Well,
I want to know that too.
that's interesting. Well, pizza boxes, the trick there is the oils and grease that gets embedded in the cardboard, which degrades the quality of the fiber in the material, of course. Now, composters often don't mind that. Of course, it's going to get degraded. That's not a problem for composters. So sometimes pizza boxes, in that case, if you're talking on a larger scale, can move to that market. I've also seen folks say, hey, if it's clean, if it's, sometimes pizza delivery, have a little liner under there, and if you take that out, then the pizza, all it is corrugated cardboard. Fine, throw that in there. It's fine, as long as it's not excessively, if it doesn't have pizza left in it, which oftentimes does, but if you're good about doing that and pulling out that liner, if it doesn't have excessive grease, you're going to be okay. So, yeah. All right.
Any others?
Question. I noticed at the very beginning of your presentation that there was a reference to you working with local municipalities. Is that for the waste that they generate, or is that for the residential recycling waste that they pick up as part of their city services?
Part of what we call loosely the state's recycling office, which is part of our division, provides technical assistance to local governments in their waste reduction programs, so in their recycling programs. So we provide assistance to the solid waste director and the recycling coordinators who are working on developing local programs to reduce their waste. So we try to help them, offer suggestions, offer opportunities for them to network. We have grant programs for local governments. By the way, we also have grant programs for recycling businesses, but I don't think that applies to you guys because y'all are generators. But we have to try to build those markets that y'all can then use. We have grant programs that can do that. So our local government team focuses on trying to improve the local recycling infrastructure.
And what do you find is the biggest hindrance to a robust local recycling program? Is it the logistics, having enough carriers to pick up and deliver? Is it having facilities to accept the residential?
I think in the rural areas, it tends to be more getting collection services to. We've seen a tremendous growth in curbside recycling programs, for example, in the state, and it's done fantastic. I mean, I don't remember the figure our local government team could tell you, but I mean, it's this incredible percentage of North Carolina residents have access to curbside recycling. But where they don't is the rural areas. So we are trying to encourage either local governments to either start taking that on, because oftentimes local governments don't collect from the rural areas. Sometimes they do, or they can offer franchise agreements. And then also our recycling business grants also prioritize that as a project for private recycling collectors to come offer that curbside service. So that's part of it, just trying to make an efficient program. Contamination is an issue. We try to get public information out and help local governments do that as well to their citizens so that they can reduce the contamination.
Well, it'll make you feel any better. I live in a rural section of Cumberland County, so we have to take our stuff to
Yeah, so there are convenience centers, yeah.
And we fondly or not so fondly refer to the gentleman who is the attendant there as Tom the Trash Nazi, because he will not let us put things in the wrong recycling containers.
Hooray for staffed convenience centers, right?
Good for him. So what I want you to figure out is people like me that go to the beach and they don't have recycling capability, is at least put it when you're coming off the beach, is have a recycling center there. So that those of us who haul it back to our house and then discard it, it would be nice to have one a little bit closer by. Because every now and then you got to come off the island anyway to go buy something else. So take it and recycle it while you're coming off the island. Thank you, Wendy and Tarek. I think, do we have lunches here? So we are ready to go. We're not but a couple of minutes behind, so we're in good shape. So just out the door. The other thing, a couple of others, is if you go out this door to the right, the restrooms are almost right across the hallway in terms of doing that. The other is, besides lunch being ready, is these presentations both ways. One is just the PowerPoint presentations we'll have posted on our website. The other thing is we're videotaping this, so if you miss a part of it or you want to get a reminder or go back through the information again, that will also be available too. So again, great in terms of the technology. Thank you, Sheila. So we'll break for a few minutes. We'll come right back in and we'll get started and roll on with the Power Resource Group, who is Rich Deming. So thank you all very much. And of course, speakers will be around for a little bit too, so capture them if you want to ask another additional questions. Thank you. Rich Deming is a managing partner. Rich, thanks very much for giving us some time out of your day, and I'll let you have at it. Thanks very much.
I could probably make up the time. I don't need a lot of time. Anyway, yeah, I'm the managing partner of Power Resource Group. We are actually a Charlotte-based group, and we're so busy out east that in November we just moved our offices out east. We're having a facility built actually in Farmville to house our kind of headquarters, and we're working on several projects out here. A lot of the projects we're working on out here are animal waste related. I kind of like to say that Eastern North Carolina is the Saudi Arabia of animal waste. But my background actually is, and one reason when John reached out to me, you said sure I'd come by and chat for a while, because my background is really more in industrial waste streams and in waste streams related to sort of, that usually have to be dispensed of in a landfill or et cetera. And there's some misconception around that. Really, there's sometimes that some folks kind of see that as maybe not complementary to recycling, which is, Wendy and I were just chatting earlier, is completely not the case, because we're really only interested in waste streams that have a tipping fee typically, or some other sort of cost to them. Because we can take those waste streams and we're really focused on making energy out of it. So we make electricity to put on the grid. In North Carolina, you have to put it on the grid. There's no such thing as third-party power sales. Or we make a lot of heat. And in the ideal situation, we're making both and providing heat to industrial processes that use heat. We also can evaporate water. We can do a lot of stuff with the energy that we get off of there. When you make electricity, it's pretty, typically you have a lot of heat on the backside of it. So the win-win is really to do both. So our company is, just really briefly, like I said, came out of Color Energy, which is a consulting firm in Charlotte. And in 2013, I was really itching to get out and develop some projects, as my background is development. And so we left to work basically just on utilizing waste streams. We've done oils to biodiesel. We've done a Reventure Park is something we're real proud of out on the outside of Charlotte. We were the first consultants in on a big 667-acre landfill site that we removed from the Superfund, one of the only times that's ever been done nationally, and kind of put 3 or 4 different energy projects in it. It's a pretty fascinating project, and multiple other things. We spent a lot of time during the recession connecting Department of Energy funds to public and private projects. We funneled about $7 or $8 million into some thermal solar and some other projects, but usually related to waste. But what I thought I would do real quick is hit on the main project we're working on here, and there's about 8 slides of it. I think I'll go through them pretty fast. I'll admit I caged them from another presentation, but really to kind of tell you what we're doing out east right now, and then I'll circle back to kind of some of the concepts of waste streams like recycling, and what we're working on for some future pipelines on recyclable plastics and some other things. Our big preoccupation right now, the whole team is kind of going crazy on it, is a pipeline of projects called Carolina Poultry Power. They actually utilize renewable energy certificates that we sell to the utility companies to use poultry waste. And so it gives you a good example of the kind of things we can do, especially we're co-located at an industrial site and what we're doing for that industrial site, et cetera. In this particular case, we're not using a waste stream from the factory in the factory. We're using poultry waste that we've treated for texture and moisture content and odor, and we drive it into an industrial facility with 3 large boilers, and we make about 1.5 megawatts of electricity, and then we make about 60,000 pounds per hour of steam that we provide to industry. There's my background, the developer, not important. And there's the team. It takes a village to do one of these things. It's almost shocking how many people you have to have involved. I mean, there are 5 lawyers that, go into the intricacies of tax stuff, and there are 4 or 5 different engineers. And it always amazes me how engineering seems to me like it should be objective, but it seems to get subjective sometimes. Different engineers have different ideas, and so getting everything through in a way that gets properly permitted and works properly, et cetera, it's a long process. Our site of our first one is in Farmville, and it's located on the back side of a 36-acre site. And on that site, we're a separate drive, and we bring enclosed trucks in a negative air pressure fuel haul to the boiler. Now that waste stream going into those boilers could be almost anything. Like I said, I'll circle back at the end, and there's a lot of different ways to make electricity and heat. And there's a lot of different technologies you can apply. There's AD that was discussed earlier. There's also sort of very limited oxygen combustion, high heat, which is really called pyrolysis. There's several different ways you can do it. So what we really kind of look for are factories that have enough space somewhere on an out parcel. We love it if we can have a separate entrance over in a corner near the power lines is where we like to locate. In this case, we're using a Hearst boiler, which is 30-year-old technology. It's really important in our case that we have bankable technology. And I probably should step back just a second. What we really are is an independent power producer. And what it means is we don't look to sell anybody anything. We don't look to make revenue off of, we're not coming in and installing machines that we've sold to these sites. We come in, we have a long-term lease for whatever our little space is. We have an energy services agreement. We have a waste agreement where we're going to take the waste and we're going to provide this amount of energy, something to fit the factory that we're in. And basically, our funding is by outside investors, and what we just really need from our host sites are long-term offtake agreements, bankable long-term offtake agreements. The finance people need to know that those are strong because they're going to put in, this facility is $28 million. They're going to put a lot of money into it, and so they have to know that, it's going to be there for 15 years and they're going to get their return on investment. But technology on that is a Hearst boiler. We're very close to the Hearst folks. They're quite a hoot. They're in South Georgia down there, and pretty interesting business down there. But they probably are the best at making solid fuel boilers. The first one they installed in 1967 is still out there. I mean, they're just really workhorses. On top of that, you put really robust emissions technologies. There are 8 years ago, a lot of people were saying, the new pollution control requirements are going to shut down business and are going to, shut down factories, et cetera. Really, at this point, it's made the industry come up with some strikingly good emissions control. I mean, the numbers you have to hit are so minuscule, and we can come in much lower than those. We use wet electrostatic precipitators. We can use all kinds of really great emissions control, and that's key. Because you don't want to, as one of the slides down there in a minute says, this is green technology, so it's got to be clean. And frankly, the industry has a little bit of a bad vibe over the years because in the you can go Google anything, and in the 90s there were open grate incinerators with poor emissions control technology, and it really kind of gave the concept of waste energy a bad name, and it's not your grandfather's waste energy anymore. Benefits to local industry, and that one might be kind of interesting to this crowd. So at the place that we're at, We're providing baseline electricity to the local utility. I mean, those electrons don't ever leave the site. But in North Carolina, you can't do third-party power sales. So we are interconnected with the local EMC, who then turns around and sells it back to industry. So they kind of get their cut, they really like working with us. And the reason is that a lot of times these utilities are dealing with solar, more rarely in this state wind, and those are sexy renewable energy technologies, but they're also intermittent power. And so it puts a burden on the grid, because the grid still has to be there as if there's nothing, and has to be maintained for nothing, but then also able to accept sudden bursts of power, et cetera. And believe me, I'm not against solar. I've developed some solar projects too, but from a utility perspective, 24/7 baseline power is gold. And so especially with a smaller utility like that, we're on a circuit that they needed more power, and we're providing it, and they loved it. So after we make the electricity, we push a bunch of steam over there. I mentioned 60,000 pounds an hour, and that steam is used for a bunch of different things. This particular facility had cut production back because their wastewater exceeded what the town would take. And so we're building them about an acre and a half worth of ponds and a nozzle system, and we kind of heat that water very hot as it comes out of the facility. It drops into a couple of 4-bays, and then goes through a nozzle system to evaporate it. And then the solids are removed and disposed of separately. They also, the facility we were at, they actually do dog food. And they had been wanting to move up to human food, which required a lot of blanching, which in order to do that, they needed 205-degree water, 60 gallons a minute, 24/7. So we're providing them somewhere around 40,000 gallons of 205-degree water right at the spot they need it. They use it for blanching. And then that allows them to send their, mostly sweet potatoes is what they do, but they actually have quite a few other vegetables coming through there. And so by being able to blanch them, they get the right color, and that enables them to go to the human food market. Without the blanching, it's a sort of washed out color that they just don't really get away with doing the same thing. We provide them then, after that, we provide them 180-degree sterilization water on demand at all times, 24/7. So that replaced a large natural gas boiler they had for that. And I was just looking at what else we do there. So essentially, one of the benefits of that is that instead of having to have natural gas boilers sort of booted up, which natural gas is cheap right now, but there's talk that when exports open, et cetera, it won't always be cheap. In this case, they were just really, really, really happy. To be honest, the thing they were the happiest about was taking care of their wastewater, because natural gas is cheap, power is cheap, and that's a challenge in North Carolina. I mean, we have opportunities in the Northeast that are different because you have high tipping fees and high power prices. And so a lot of times what we do is beneficial in North Carolina if it's animal related and we can get renewable energy certificates to support the pro forma. That's great. Or if you're solving some other problem like the wastewater problem, it becomes a big thing for those guys. So, well, like I said, I just underscore it is a green project. I mean, it's a strikingly stringent sort of emission control requirements, and we're taking a waste that's really usually land distributed, and it has value as a fertilizer, but there's 1 billion tons of it or pounds of it a year around this region, and so there's too much to land apply, and so we get to divert some of that away to make energy without taking anything away from the use of it as a fertilizer where it's good. Feedstock, it's poultry litter, so not real sexy, but on the other hand, it's, I find it to be so, to take something that's a waste stream like that and make it into a usable fuel. And the litter is just growing more and more and more, and meanwhile, the environmental rules, you can look some places in the country like Chesapeake Bay, it's just a disaster up there because of all the, the excess of potassium and phosphorus ends up in the ditch and then the creek and then the river, and then you have fish kills, et cetera. And so diverting that away is we think, or we know, is a good thing. So, we have an associated company with a 200-acre farm where we take it all and process it so that, you're not driving a truckload of something that smells into a food processing facility. By the time it gets to the food processing facility, it's lost in their truck traffic and it's in fully enclosed trucks. And so you can do interesting things with waste where, it's hard to even tell what's going on from the outside. Like I said, we put it in a negative air pressure building, and it's there's a lot of safeguards that what we're doing doesn't conflict with what the host sites are doing. So that's what we're doing right now. That takes up most of my time. I have some folks working on a swine waste project, which is AD, the anaerobic digester that you heard about a minute ago. Those are interesting projects. It's an interesting time in North Carolina right now for animal waste, but I've actually got our upcoming project pipeline, and we're working with several single stream recyclers, mostly out of state at this point. I'd love to be chatting with some folks in state, but again, it's the economics thing. Is plastics 3 and 4 and higher are pretty tough to recycle. And most folks put those like in their recycling bin and they assume they're going somewhere good. But if you actually go to the sorting facility, overwhelmingly those plastics, if there's no market for them and they're difficult to recycle, just get put in a dumpster and go to the landfill. And so, we're trying to coax in our other projects so energy out of poultry litter, which is tough. It takes all this processing and drying and doing everything because you got about 4,000 BTUs. Plastics are like 11,000 or 13,000. They're trickier to work with, and you have to handle them in a certain way. But what we're really excited about for the future is we're working with several single stream recyclers because they use heat in their facility, they use a lot of power, and they're shipping this stuff out to landfills in the Northeast at $120, $130 a ton for a landfill. And so we co-locate in their factory and provide them heat, provide them electricity, and do away with that sort of landfilling, especially in the space that they occupy, in the sort of economy as sort of, recycling is the big thing. To eliminate a ton of landfilling like that, and by ton, I really mean, some of them have 150 tons a day of this stuff going out. It's a good thing for those guys to get to zero landfilling. We've talked to a lot of companies in the area as we were finding our first sites. And for instance, some of the facilities had a bunch of wastewater, and then they also had a bunch of stuff that was going to the landfill. It's interesting you asked about pizza boxes, for instance, even packaging that had been contaminated, and they couldn't do anything with it from a recycling perspective. And so, in that case, we studied chopping them up and putting them into the other waste stream and getting them to zero landfilling as well. And so, there's a lot of interesting options out there. I worked before I was doing our own projects. I worked as a consultant to industry and to government on reduction, really with a focus on the energy side of it. That's where I come at this, and so happy to answer any questions about if you've got a waste stream particularly, or if you've got a waste stream that you pay to get rid of. It has to be of a certain volume, and it has to be that we're displacing a tipping fee usually, but there's some interesting conversations that can be had around that. But anyway, happy to take any questions. Yes?
How do you negotiate power purchase agreements with the utilities?
How what?
How have you found working with the utilities to purchase the power that you're?
Yeah, it's interesting. I tell you, we don't even look, and this is not anything against Duke. I sell my RECs to Duke, and I'm very tight with the team there that I work with directly. But we don't even look at a site if it's on Duke at the moment, because the interconnection queue is really messed up right now. I mean, they're at about a 2-year delay. I've got a couple of projects that are just on hold literally for years. One of them has been held up for 2 years, and I understand maybe into 2018. So we kind of learned our lesson. We put some money into that. At that point, the interconnection queue was not so damaged, and I'll just be blatantly honest. It came from the explosion of solar, and with our tax credit in North Carolina, it was we have more installed solar than anyone but California, I think. I mean, and that's not on a per capita basis. That's for real. And the thing is, that's intermittent power. and then in the North Carolina grid has tried to absorb it so much, so they've shut down the interconnection queue in effect, and they're kind of dribbling out. And so we like dealing with these EMCs. I mean, we're in an interconnection queue of 1 in Farmville, and it's a beautiful thing. And instead of, I think there's 750 projects blocked right now. But anytime you're working with utilities, it's like anything else. If you first started and you just picked up the phone and called them, it's painful, and it might take you months to find the right person. But then if you find the right person and you make their life easier, they're going to take your call, you know what I mean? And so I enjoy dealing with utilities. But
Do you see the natural gas pipeline coming into the state affecting that queue further down the line, or do you think the availability?
the gas line?
Yeah.
The gas line is interesting. Right now, gas, or if you're in industry, I mean, gas is so cheap, and it might be for a while, and the natural gas pipeline might change that. I mean, a lot of facilities I talk to now down here pay more for transport than the gas itself, and so that would theoretically open it up. I mean, I'm a big fan of natural gas. I mean, just for what it's done, while eliminating emissions and cheap energy, it's a great thing. I mean, and so I don't see how it'll affect the queue, the interconnection queue. It'll continue to affect. It's just one more sort of boundary line in my part of the world. You kind of got to watch. I mean, if natural gas was $11, people would be beating down my door. But because gas is so cheap, it's easy to kind of just put it off. You really almost have to have a waste problem before you want to deal with this, really, or like I said in our host site there in Farmville, a wastewater problem. But no, I don't think the natural gas thing will affect the queue much. But I'm not sure if I understood the question completely. But
I may not have asked it very clearly either, just as far as having, it will become a greater resource.
Yeah.
A fuel or an energy resource here that we haven't had at that scale before. So you sort of watched solar move in, and now I'm not quite sure what we're gonna
Yeah, it's
do.
interesting.
And then move wind, with wind and the military piece.
I think the gas thing
Whole
is
other thing, but, yeah.
the gas thing's fascinating. I mean, it's watching. So the World Bank says it's going to be $12 whatever in 5 years, and I guess they're kind of really ramping up output or exports or something. But for this particular area, that pipeline's going to keep it cheap, I would think. So, which is exciting. I mean, I'm not anti-gas. I mean, I like to think I'm displacing coal, but.
It's nice to see finally after, we had the REPS standard for years, and there was support, but little movement of actually getting products in the ground and providing energy, so it's great to see projects like
And it's tough. It's tough. I mean, and there were a couple of folks that I blatantly tell. Prestige Ag, I mean, those guys were chipping away at it in 2008 and 9. Their plant just went online. I tell them, I blatantly tell them, I've enjoyed riding on your guys' coattails because I didn't have $30 million to figure all that stuff out, So like some of my technical consultants are also on that team, and I'm always like, write down any lesson learned, you know what I mean? But it's been a long haul. I mean, and waste energy right now is a little bit like solar in 2006 or 7. You couldn't go get bank financing for solar. You couldn't go get. It was new and nobody could really wrap their head around it. And now, you can do that all day long. But it's still challenging from a finance and engineering perspective to get these done. But there's always opportunity and challenge, so.
What's the effect of you talk about the poultry litter, and I guess it would make the assumption that all the inputs, feed and everything else that goes into that is the same. So understanding there might be a lot of variability there. What's the effect of that on the digesters and some of that other equipment?
Well, so I really briefly mentioned we have an affiliate called Ag Services Company. We have a 200-acre farm, and some folks really are and we just decided it was not, even for the extra cost of handling the stuff twice, it was not worth it. But a lot of the other plants take directly from the farms, and it might have been sitting out in the rain for a month. It might have had a different. I mean, variability is the enemy of good, consistent operation of a boiler, and so What we do is take it, and we have some people whose job depends on, and their bonuses depend on, that stuff comes out with consistent energy value, moisture content, et cetera. So we kind of get away from the variability side on that. The folks that aren't doing that typically, one group has a several 100,000 square foot fuel hall, and they just take it all straight from the farm and throw it in there, and they've got some issues with neighbors and odor, et cetera. I mean, by taking a 200-acre farm that's been a poultry farm for 30 years, we've eliminated that concept. Nobody thinks anything. All the neighbors are poultry farmers. Nobody thinks anything about it, but certainly variability is a huge issue, and the whole material handling thing. So, if you're doing plastics, for instance, plastics are really tough in most boiler technology, just because once they melt, how is it being handled in there? And so what we're studying on that is putting it through basically a massive blender, maybe with contaminated cardboard or with some animal waste or whatever. In a misconception, when you think of animal waste, you're picturing the actual manure, but the bedding is half of it, and it's wood chips, you know what I mean? So you can mix that in with the plastics and get something that's homogeneous and constant in energy value is what you really need. A lot of projects fail on that. A lot of people don't pay attention to that, and then it's a problem. But
Have you worked very much with swine waste as a feedstock?
yeah.
But that's for eastern North Carolina, that would be.
Yeah. We're actually working with a group, and it's actually a group of former Smithfield folks who are now engaged with Smithfield, and we've got a massive farm up in northeastern North Carolina. We're actually working on that project, and that's a pure AD project. I mean, it's, poultry is dry, and so that's combustion, but you're not going to combust, swine waste, and so that's AD completely. And so, yeah, we are working on that project. That's been the toughest. The portfolio standard had certain carve-outs, and that's the law that gave us these recs. And first was solar. Well, that's been cashed out through 2025 for years. Second was poultry, and thanks to some of the early starters, and now some folks like myself right behind them, we're going to have that filled next year, probably that obligation. And then swine is the last one. It's the harder one because there's just not water doesn't burn. It's tough to get energy out of that. And one of these facilities, now combustion-wise, that's a $28 million facility. So like these lagoons with swine are usually more like $2 to $6 million, which, believe it or not, makes it harder. Because somebody told me when I first started, and I was like, that makes no sense to me. It's harder to raise $6 million than it is $28 million. Because all your transaction costs are the same, all the brain damage is the same, everything's the same for the smaller return on investment, and that's one reason it's harder because there's not a lot of energy in that. AD makes energy, but it's just nowhere close to the same sort of brute force ton of energy, and so that energy has to somehow pay off the cash, and it's a smaller transaction, so it's tough. It'll be getting there. It's interesting where we're going now is to find a lot of farms near each other and pipe the gas to a central spot, preferably at a substation, and just really maximize and increase volume. Interestingly enough, that's kind of turning out to be that low tech is the way to go. Some of our larger failures, some of the early projects have struggled mightily. Including the Blue Spear one we saw. I mean, it's taken those guys about 7 years, and in my opinion, it was over complicating technology. With swine waste particularly, it's not rocket science. Put it under a cover and let the methane, build up and push it out. You know what I mean? And so I think those are the projects that are going to succeed. So, no problem.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Ariana Billingsley. I'm the Regional Center Director with the Small Business and Technology Development Center at East Carolina University. Yes, they make me say that every time. Let's see if I can. Yeah. There we go. So by show of hands, how many of you are familiar with SPTDC? Oh, so we got a few. All right, the SPTDC, or the Small Business and Technology Development Center, is the business advisory service of the university system. What we do is basically provide business counseling to small businesses in North Carolina. It's a nationwide program. We're one of the only states that have the T component, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. We have been around since 1984. We're housed in North Carolina University System campuses. I'm at East Carolina University, and then I'll show a map of all the different locations, all 10 locations in the state of North Carolina. We're funded by the Small Business Administration, and that funding is matched by the state of North Carolina through the university system, so your tax dollars at work here. So it says no fee, that's why it says no fee and not free, so thanks for paying your taxes. We're nationally accredited. We are the only program in the United States that's been accredited without conditions continuously since 1984, and that's something we're pretty proud of. All of our services, as I said, they're no-fee services or no-fee counseling, business counseling, and they're confidential, and we take that pretty seriously. So anything that you disclose to us as counselors remains with us. So even though we're funded by tax dollars, which sometimes people think we may be subject to Freedom of Information Act, we're not. There we go. So what does that mean for the business? We provide high quality, and what I mean by that is that most of the people that work for our organization, all 80 plus that we are all over the state of North Carolina, most of them have an advanced degree. Actually, the vast majority of them have an advanced degree. They're a master's or a PhD. And what's most importantly, most of them come from industry. So they've owned their own business. They've been out there and doing this exactly what the small business that they'll be working with have been doing. We do have access through the university system, also tools that we buy ourselves, and resources that a small business normally wouldn't have access to that we can share and utilize to help that small business formalize a strategy that will help them in the long run. Our general business counseling focuses primarily on, helping a business get access to funding, manage their money, and develop or increase their market share. Some of the services that we provide include the government procurement services, or the PTAC program. North Carolina, it's a little bit different than other states in the country. We are together with the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, which is a program that's funded by the Defense Logistics Agency. This is a group of specialized technical experts that work with small businesses that want to participate or are participating in government contracting. And that can go anything from state, federal, to local, to municipal type contracting. The services, again, are for free because, again, they're paid for by tax dollars. And that technical expertise can go from registrations and certifications, both on state, local, or federal, which is kind of the simple steps in getting into government contracting, to more complicated stuff like review and proposals, review and solicitations, after action review, managing contracts, and so forth. The T that I mentioned earlier on in the presentation, we're one of the very few states, we were actually the first state in the US and one of the very few states that have the T component, the technology. And we do have that because we have a team of specialty consultants, or counselors, I should say, that work with companies or individuals who have an IP in helping them commercialize it, or through the process of commercializing it. We do offer some assistance on SBIR and STTR proposal review if the companies or individuals are looking at that, but primarily if the company has an IP and they're looking at commercializing, they'll walk them through the process of finding funding and commercializing it. International business development, it's exactly what it sounds. We have a team of specialty counselors that work with companies that either are exporting or looking at exporting their products or services outside of the United States This can be from identifying markets, doing a market analysis, to getting access to funding to help them export their products outside of the U.S., through collaboration with Exim Bank and so forth. Market research, it's one of our specialty services headed out of Raleigh that we've utilized here recently, it looks like a lot with companies that have been wanting to establish facilities in North Carolina, be that foreign companies or companies that is outside of North Carolina that have been wanting to come to the state. We've provided, they've reached out to us, and we've provided some market analysis of what areas would be most feasible for the company, given access to either the raw material, the specialized workforce that they're looking for, or so forth. As I said, we have access to both university-wide expertise and different tools that the university has, so that's enabled us to provide that service. Private equity and strategy and growth services, these are the only two services that we do charge a fee, primarily the strategy and growth services. That's because it's a hands-on, more of a consultant type, developing a strategy for the business. They usually spend quite a considerable amount of time with the business in identifying the strategy, be that an exit strategy or multi-generational move from one generation to the other, taking ownership and so forth. So they develop a targeted, specific to the company, step-by-step process rather than just consulting them. So it's far more in-depth. But in comparison to what a consultant would charge or a consulting firm would charge for that, it's pretty inexpensive, quite a bargain. Here's the different offices that we have in North Carolina. We have 10 regional offices that cover pretty much all the 100 counties in the state. All of our services are available to all the 100 counties in the state. We're headquartered out of Raleigh, or our state administrative office is out of Raleigh at NC State. So a little bit about going to the staff expertise and how it relates to the P2 project and what we're doing here. So our general business counselors, which is primarily our bread and butter, are counselors that not only have the expertise in terms of the qualifications that they've gotten through certifications and advanced degrees and so forth, but also qualifications that come through running their own business and operating in certain industries. They can use certain tools based on the knowledge that they have to formulate strategies for companies who are seeking capital. Most of these projects eventually going to require some sort of capital to be that minimal or larger capital for them to be implemented. They can utilize tools like Profit Sense, and we make that available to pretty much all the businesses that we work with, and that's a tool that through the financials that we require from the company we're working with, we can benchmark them to other companies in that industry similarly situated. And what I mean by that is that we're not going to compare a company with 20 employees to another company with 200 employees. That's not feasible. Or a company that's generating $7 million in sales to a company that's doing $500,000 in sales. So we're generating, these are all actual companies we're benchmarking them with that have self-reported their financials. Market research and market intelligence, one of the things that we have access to, it's an IBIS World report and similar kind of reports. Those are market intelligence reports that if a small business would want to go and get it themselves, would be anywhere between $800 to $1,600 for one report individually. We have access to them both through the university and internally through SBTDC, and we can provide the client with that market intelligence that looks at the market that the company is operating both 5 years to date, so 5 years prior and 5 years in the future. So allows us to formulate based on their financials, based on the market analysis, help the company come up and formulate a strategy that's feasible for them. What is the value to the businesses? I mean, if that wasn't clear through some of the things that we do, some of the things that we've noticed or that we've seen with companies we've worked over the 30 plus years we've been in operation, there's an improved understanding in the business health. So where do I stand? How do I compare with the industry? And then they utilize the research that we provide them and some of the reports that we provide the company to formulate a strategy that's viable and feasible and they can act upon, understand whether they can grow and that they should grow and what rate they should do that, understand whether that financial growth or that growth can come internally and can utilize internal assets to be achieved or whether they will need internal or external financing for that. And in going with that, I brought a case study on a recent company, and it's been what we call sanitized. The names of the company, actual name has been removed to protect the the innocent. This is a company that, and this is kind of how it flows with the reports that they would get from the students and from the teams that are working with them and identifying some of the efficiencies that the company can achieve. So in working with the company, and this may look a little bit similar to what Tarek and his team will bring to the company after they've reviewed their different energy usage and operation. So some of the things they've identified in the report that they present to the company can be, hey, if you, in this particular case, if you replace all of the lighting in the facility with LED lighting, you'll realize a $960 savings. Of course, it's going to cost you $4,000 for that. The payback period is four and a quarter years. Skylights, air compressor, solar. So they presented this to the company. Here is what we think it will cost you based on the information that we know right now. Here's how much it will save you, and here's the time frame too. So now the company gets this, and a deciding point is whether they want to implement it or not. And of course, we're dealing with small businesses. So when you deal with a small business, sometimes this just makes it to the shelf, and that's where it remains. And sometimes some of the more proactive businesses that are looking at growing, they're looking at this like there is an opportunity here, but how do we do it? What do we do next? So this is where we step in and we'll work with the company. We'll analyze their liquidity, we'll analyze their profitability, sales, borrowing, assets that they have internally, and kind of figure out where is the company financially right now. And based on that, we may be like, hey, financially, you can't implement any of these because you can't sustain that. That's not something that's feasible to you financially. Or yes, you can, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to identify, basically, on the cost, we're going to verify whether those costs are going to be actual and real based on current industry. Calculate their debt service, so how much is it going to cost you if you were to borrow that money? And one of the things that businesses usually or sometimes will forget is there hidden cash in the business? What is it going to improve other than strictly, here's like if you replace this with solar energy, here's what it's going to cost you, and here's what it's going to bring you in. But then there's other elements of it that are outside elements, indirect elements that will influence the cash flow because there are expenses that the company wouldn't have to face. So in this particular business, they thought that the solar energy being one of the key things and being everywhere out there in the state of North Carolina, they thought that sounded really great, but the cost was really high. So we looked at their financials, and through reviewing their financials and finding some of that hidden cash or cash that they wouldn't have to spend should they implement this, we found them $43,000 worth of money that they could hidden cash, if you will, or improved or efficiencies internal to the company. The net cost of the project after tax credits and other incentives ended up being $160,000. So the debt service on $160,000 should they go get a loan For 10 years at a 6.5 rate, doing an SBA loan was $21,000 a year. So that realized a $21,000 savings for the company based on the analysis that we did. So obviously they decided to go for that, and it's a pretty cool, ended up almost not costing them any money basically doing that. So it's a great story. Not all of them end up this way. Sometimes we get into the financials, which technically tend to tell a story that may or may not drive in the same direction as the one that the owners sometimes tell us. So that's where the real story we find is. And then we can look at the numbers and look at the strategy where the company, and sometimes we end up working on certain other things, not specifically on the energy savings or waste reduction type stuff. But that's our follow-on when the company goes through the project of analyzing their efficiencies through the P2 project. And with that, I know I went pretty fast through stuff. Are there any questions? Yes.
I have one combination for really you and Tara, and that is, when you're going through the double-up analysis between the two of you, when you come across a company and one of the elements is, do they want to replace an old boiler or an old compressor because it's aged and they get a more energy efficient one?
Correct.
Do you also factor in the risk assessment of if that boiler is of a certain age, the likelihood of it basically going out of service on an emergency basis, and then your cost of business loss associated with that?
All of that is part of the hidden cash.
That's part of the hidden cash.
Correct. It's the cost of repair. It's the downtime, so the missed productivity. All of those are part of the cash. So here's if this, didn't live up, or you in 6 months you're going to have to replace this and have a downtime where you're replacing this. Here's what it's going to cost you.
Just as a follow-up to that question, we could probably run some what-if analysis too. I mean, what if sales drop 10%, interest rate goes up, all that?
Yeah. We work, when we're working on doing like the debt service and all that, we're working under the assumption that the company is going to go for an SBA back loan. Those tend to be a little bit more advantageous. The process is a little bit more cumbersome, but tend to be more lenient towards the small business in the sense of the terms of the loan. So that's sort of what we're going to factor in. But we've run into circumstances where we've done all the calculations, and we meet with the client a month later or 2 weeks later after we've gone through 3 years projections and balance sheets and everything. And like I just got off the phone with the banker, and that 6.5% just became 6.75%. Granted, that's a very small, like in the big sense of the word, but then we have to recalculate and hopefully wait that nothing else is going to change with them. But yeah, we help them calculate. And one of the things that I should kind of clarify, we present the owner of the company, and I think that's a big distinction between us and the consultant. We present the company and the owner with all of our findings, solutions, and recommendations, but it is up to them ultimately to make any sort of decisions on which way they're going to go and how they're going to go. And we don't do legal advice, and we don't do tax advice, full disclosure. So, yes?
Seems like your services would be very beneficial to businesses who are affected by DOT projects. Have y'all had any coordination with the Department of Transportation and businesses that have to relocate because of, that are forced to relocate? I wonder.
We haven't worked with, that I'm aware of, out of our office. Of course, we cover 12 counties in the eastern part, so I'm not entirely, we haven't had any in ours, but we do have businesses that we've helped them, or we've recommended that they relocate for 2 reasons. One was proximity to their target market, and second was a benefit in buying the facility rather than renting where they were renting. So, I mean, it's all situational, but no, we haven't dealt that I'm aware of out of our office. Absolutely. This is our marketing dollars. Obviously don't have one, so, yeah,
We've worked with Ron Massey, with the city, from the smallest center at the college. And when we had the DOT meeting the other night, we were there to let anyone ever need some council.
You were back there.
yeah, so we work usually out of our office. We have usually anywhere between high 200s to 350 clients that we work with on a yearly basis. So, and we also, because we're part of the university system, much like Tarek and his team, we also work with students quite a bit and place students with companies to help them with something particular. Like this semester, we have 15 companies that are working with student teams, primarily out of the College of Business and the Miller School of Entrepreneurship at ECU, that are working from website reviews to online marketing strategies, to marketing strategies for companies who are looking at expanding, to international business. I mean, you name it. We got, like I said, just this semester, about 15 companies. Yes.
What about our information sharing? But also asking the question, so relates something that Wendy said earlier too, Wendy, that when the companies are going through that, regardless of whether they own or don't own their building, it is an issue for some that the landlord doesn't want to make improvements. So I'm thinking, do you factor in incentives that might be available? They could be local or they could be at the state level. And the particular one I'm thinking about is through the rural division, is the building reuse
grant.
Restoration, particularly if the company's growing.
Yeah.
They have it, that they could access those funds that would offset the cost actually to the building owner and still benefit that local business.
We work quite a bit with those. Most of the commerce funded or EDPNC funded type grants, CDBG, STEP, any of those, we refer them to. That's another thing that we're experts at, referrals. In case we cannot do it, we have referral resources that we can refer the client to, but commerce and EDPNC and obviously you guys.
Don't forget their local economic development.
Absolutely. They're actually a great referral source for us because most of the times it's a company is looking at locating at an area. They're a great idea, but financially are they viable? So we'll do a review of both of their business plan and their financials, especially to see whether what they're projecting and where they're going actually matches to what industry analysis says that they should be heading to. So we'll do those as well. But yeah, we work really closely with economic development, of course, with you guys, and NCEAST Alliance, great partner for us, and referrals. As I said, and I mean it, we don't really have a marketing budget. This is our marketing budget, like telling people who we are and what we do and how we can help. So.
Any other questions for Ariana? Or for that matter, any one of our other speakers? Something that you thought? Thanks very much to all of our speakers, Tarek, Wendy, Rich, and Ariana. We do appreciate you taking time out of your day. Cheap marketing ploy for you. This is the way you do it. Having opportunities to be able to spread the message about what we do is important for us as on a regional scale, but certainly for people like Sheila at the local economic development level, is that it does take a team to be able to succeed in growing your local economy or regional economy, because it's an accumulation of what happens at the local level that stimulates us on a regional scale too. Thank you all for attending. Again, I don't see Jeremy, but I think we should be able to have all of the presentations posted on our website by Monday. And the other thing I think is, what's the local channel that this will be rebroadcast on?
GTED
Beautiful. Thanks very much, Sheila. And again, thank you for helping us out today. Thank Onslow County for letting us use your facility. It's a beautiful place. That does it. Again, this is the second out of a planned 4 series that we'll be working in partnership with ECU. So look in terms of in your mailbox for the next one. Probably won't be until sometime after the beginning of the year. Haven't exactly determined that yet. Welcome any suggestions or ideas. We could come up with a few, but certainly those are out there that are engaging with business and industry. Love to hear your ideas in terms of what might be of interest, or a service provider or some point of knowledge that would be good to invite in as a speaker to deliver content. All of those ideas, we'd love to hear from you. So I think you have mine. It's chafee@nceast.org. You can contact me. For those of you in Onslow County, certainly your primary point of contact is Sheila or Jeremy. We'd be delighted to hear from you. Thanks again. Hope it proved of value. We'll look forward to hearing from you and seeing you again soon. Thank you.